they're particularly rude today with these silly gremlins, but hopefully this works. It's sort of quite sporadic. It might have something to do with all the vegetation that's surrounding us in this drainage line. And we're also limited to where we can move around for the moment, as I've only just heard guests walking along the walkway back towards the camp. So hopefully they would have seen this leopard and all got excited and decided to skip tea and coffee and come straight out and join us. And then hopefully we can get a different view too. But he's a beautiful cat, though. He's obviously stopped dragging the carcass, and he's now just laying down, chomping on that bushbuck, having a little feed. At one point, he was staring up at a tree, and I thought he might take it up a jackalberry. And I think he will. I don't think he's going to leave it on the ground for too long. Chomping away quite nicely now. And I mean, there was a fair amount of flesh still left on this bushbuck, so I think he's definitely going to feed on it for most of the day. Perhaps he'll finish it up this afternoon, or maybe he's hungry enough that he'll gobble it all up now. But First Lady, you've asked about the success rate of leopards in the wild. Unfortunately, it's not particularly good, and your question was referring to leopard cubs. And as we've unfortunately seen over the last few years, and most guides in the Sabi Sand, you know, the heart of the leopards in South Africa, is we don't see many of them making it past 6 months if they're lucky. I mean, if they can get to about 2 years old, they've got a relatively good chance of carrying on, but life often it just gets harder and harder, particularly for a young male leopard, or I suppose for a young female leopard too, as both sexes mark and defend territories. So the boys will go out. They'll normally have to disperse quite far away from home. Although, examples, look at Quarantine. He didn't have to go very far. There's a gap on sort of eastern section, southeastern corner of Cheetah Plains, and he's quite happily taken that up. Hosana seems to be lingering around. You better be careful, though, especially with Hukumuri. Well, Tingana seems to be acting like a gentleman, but that's going to not last for too long before he becomes less and less tolerant with Hosana and chases him off. So I don't know where they're going to go up. And the same thing goes for girls. I mean, typically the female leopards, as we know, will open up a space for their youngsters if they are females and live within their territory. They might shift out slightly in order to accommodate their daughters. But look at the whole Karula scenario. I mean, it was very sad with her disappearance. And you saw how many leopards were fighting over that spot. Tandi came in, Shadow came in, Shongile thought it was hers, but no. There was a bit of conflict that happened there. So it's really, really tough for these cats to make it to adulthood, unfortunately. Now, Gordon, you're wondering what the purpose of a dewlap is. So lots of different animals have dewlaps. It's one of the main functions is that it's extra skin around the neck, so it actually helps sort of protect them. So you can imagine when cats fight, and particularly with leopards, lions have got big manes to protect their throats, so that helps. Leopards will obviously try and go for one another's neck, because the idea when they do have a bit of a fight, when it gets to that, normally they'll snarl and hiss at one another, and sometimes disagreements can be solved just by snarling and growling and you know, soaring and territorial markings. You might find one becomes submissive or one moves up, but when it does end up being an altercation, then they're going to fight to the death, essentially. And that extra skin around the neck is definitely going to be... Oh, sorry, that's a game drive there. I'm just going to quickly jump onto the radio to tell Taxon what's actually going on here. Sorry, everybody, I'll get back to that. Okay. Well, let me have a chat to, I suppose, Taxon, and let him know that there's a leopard in front of his lodge. It's good to hear his voice. I'm going to send you across to Steve in the meantime and see where he is. He's not taking the carcass up the jackalberry like I thought he would. Would have been amazing to just see how strong he is going up that tree. See how he keeps looking up? I think he wants to stash it somewhere, but he's now gone straight into this sort of Tumboti thicket, was going to be particularly difficult to navigate through. So we might actually have to head around. Was he going to stop? Are you going to stop briefly? Now, I'm going to keep in mind that Taxon is also coming into the sighting, so we all obviously want to try and have a view. But now we're losing ours. Let me go forward slightly. Maybe I can direct Taxon to the other side. And he can try from that way. We can stick down in here. See, because we don't have any guests, we can afford to drop down and move about and underneath all the branches, whereas Taxon's got to keep it sort of, well, in mind that he can't bop his guests on the head. Sometimes that happens, though, to sacrifice, so everybody gets a good view. Normally, nothing that a sundowner can fix the next day. Here we go. What you going to do, boy? Well, there isn't actually much left on there. I wonder if he's been feeding on it already. I mean, he hasn't got a huge belly, or perhaps Tingana is the one that's taking care of most of it. Ooh, okay. Ooh, you got caught there, like me on bushwalk. Sorry, boy, those thorns are sharp. So apparently some of you are saying that you reckon that the hyenas actually managed to get some. That would explain why there isn't much left on the carcass. It does look like it's been torn to shreds slightly, where I feel as though leopards are slightly more neater eaters, if you will, whereas a hyena just grabs wherever they can, tears chunks, and gobbles it down. So there's his tail, just sticking out. That's amazing. That's a pretty cool view. Just shows you how that white stands out in the bush. Off he goes. Okay, we'll quickly reposition. You know how good I am at doing a quick maneuver. And, right, so the bushbuck didn't look particularly big as we saw Hukumuri dragging it off. And Vicky, you're wondering exactly that. Is a bushbuck larger than a waterbuck? The answer to that is no. A waterbuck is much larger. I mean, a bushbuck is even still smaller than an inyala, and an inyala is smaller than a waterbuck. So it's not a huge meal, a decent-sized meal. I mean, it's going to definitely fill the belly. We've seen Tingana feeding on it. There were some hyenas eating on it, and now a second leopard. So it's not a small antelope. Let me just go up here slowly. I don't know where he's going to pop up. I think he'll pop up over there. Oh, no. I see everybody's staring in that direction, so he must be that side. So he's on the termite mound at the moment, which is not the greatest view, but we'll get another view of him. I don't know if he's quite finished repositioning his carcass, but we'll play the patience game, and I'm quite looking forward to getting to know this leopard. But off we go back across to Steve, who's spending time with the elephants. A rest behind a termite mound and a tamboti tree. Believe it or not, there is actually a leopard at the base of, the trunk of that tree that you can see. He's just lying on the other side there. So what we might do is he's feeding again. Oh, that's no good for us. Unfortunately, there's no way around that. I also don't want to go barging too close to him and pressure him to move off, because I am going to be having to drive over quite a few trees, so I'm going to be crunching and cracking every now and then. So we will give Taxon a chance after this, and we can maybe come back again a little bit, a little bit later. Now, he's obviously been on the move quite a bit this morning, and Caitlin, you were wondering, why is he moving that carcass? Is it because of Tingana? Is it because of the hyenas? I think a combination of everything. Remember, this is a new leopard in a new area. This is not his home. He's not the ruling male, so he's got to be on his toes. He's fairly young in comparison. I've completely forgotten how old Tingana is, but I thought he was closer to about 10 years old. And I think this male's between, I don't know, just by looking at him, maybe even 11. No, you're quite right, Nikki. I think he's moving on with time now. We forget that we have to actually age the leopards and the animals as the years go on. That's such a bad guide tendencies. We tend to keep the cubs at 6 months old, even though they've been 6 months for 2 years already. So this leopard doesn't look to be more than, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years old, somewhere around there. I don't know if there is much information on this boy. So he's going to want to move his kill to an area that's not going to attract too much attention from either hyenas, from any other predator, in fact. So this is a good spot. The birds are not going to see it, so the vultures, the bateliers, and the tawny eagles are not going to be able to spot his kill and lure anybody else in. And then, of course, if the hyenas come on in, it's not really difficult for them to come racing on through this thicket. He'll probably hoist whatever's left of the kill up in a tamboti tree, or maybe a young jackalberry that's growing on this the edge of this drainage. I don't know where Tingana has gone. what we most likely will do, or maybe, I don't know what Scott's plans are for the morning, maybe he wants to come and see what's going on. I think down on the ground is probably better. Oh, and Benoli, you also wondering about Tingana. So unfortunately, I haven't the puzzle at some point. We can go in, have a look at tracks, see if there was some commotion, if there were other leopards chasing each other, and see whether I could see lots of hyena tracks this morning. Again, though, those hyenas running up and down could have quite easily destroyed the tracks that Tingana would have left. I don't know where he's gone or what his movements are. It's also going to take me a bit of time to get used to the bush and the Sabi sand again and learn the habits of the various animals and their favorite routes to walk, not work. Now, Gordon, it's great that you're asking so many questions this morning. I'm very excited to have these chats with you, and it is, of course, important, especially if you are new and trying to figure out the story and the dramas that are unfolding on Djuma in terms of the animals. And you're wondering, why is Tingana favored over Hukumuri? Well, it's because Tingana is the resident male, and he has been for many years now. So this is essentially the underdog, and he's come into this area to try and take it from Tingana. So you can imagine, our hearts are with Tingana, although he's a very impressive leopard, Mr. Hukumuri. But whether he'll be able to take on the tank Tingana, I'm not so sure. I think Tingana's got experience on his side, and he's not a small cat. He's a fairly large cat. But Rexon was telling me that he thought that Tingana was unwell for a couple of weeks. He said he wasn't doing too well. It looked like he lost condition. But again, that's just part of the ups and downs of the bush, is that sometimes you might get an infection and it takes you a little bit longer to feed. Remember, when these cats haven't eaten anything, my goodness, they just look like skin and bones. But they can come back with one meal, even if it's something as small as a tortoise or a terrapin or a bird, a guinea fowl. Just something to give them a bit of sustenance, a bit of energy to move on to something larger. So yeah, maybe that's why Tingana didn't stand his ground. Perhaps he just decided that, it's not worth the fight. Now, with all the change that's going on, the disappearance of Mvula, there really is a serious drama going on here, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out in the next few months. And a question from Nina was, do old leopards instinctively know that they can't rule territories? I don't think so. I think they just get to a point where they're tired and they're exhausted. For instance, look at Mvula. He was so clever. He stayed around here. He didn't move very far. He shifted his territory slightly to accommodate Tingana's takeover, but he still had a great life. Often we'd see him, he'd make 1 or 2 kills and stash them in trees, and Tingana would find one and feed on it, keep him happy for a few days, then allowing Mvula to move around freely, not having to watch his back so much. So I think they're just clever when they get to that age. They've worked out the system and they know how to play it in their favor. Sometimes that's not always the case, though, especially in an area when there are lots of new young male leopards moving in, say because a resident male has perhaps been taken out. A similar situation like what we saw with Karula, with all the drama that unfolded there and everybody trying to take her spot. But I don't think there's much point hanging around here. Unfortunately, we're not going to get a better view, and unless he decides to come out towards us. But this is going to be a one-vehicle sighting. We won't be able to squeeze 2 cars in here. We'll see if there is anybody else that would like to come and have a look at some ears and perhaps the odd beautiful eyes. Oh, hang on. Let's have a look. Let's see. Let's take advantage of this while he's up and moving around, because you never know. I want to spend as much time with this cat as possible. And I actually think Taxon has moved on. I don't think it's going to be a great view for all the guests in the car to see very nicely. So apparently, that's an even better view. Apparently Tristan has a good chuckle every now and then at Hukumuri about the way that he pokes his tongue out and pants like a dog. He was doing it a little bit there. I suppose after dragging that carcass and having a couple of mouthfuls of bushbuck, you're going to be a little bit on the tired side, and that's the quickest way to cool down. But he does stick his tongue out an abnormal amount. Ah, Hukumuri, I just was praising you, and then you've gone and done this to me. Tusk, tusk, tusk. Ah, funny cat. Okay, I think we are going to leave him now.
And we have managed to get into the drainage line. Thanks, Taylor. With your guidance, we found the area and the drag marks and a very full-looking Hukumuri. Seb is very excited. It's the first time since he's seen him. He is so happy. Finally, he gets to see this wonderful leopard. We spent some time with him last night, and the comments that were coming through that he was looking quite skinny. He doesn't look skinny anymore. We passed the carcass on the way in. There's really not much left of that bushbuck. Between 2 leopards and however many hyenas last night, there is not too much going on. But he has still dragged it quite a fair way from where it was before. The drag mark is actually directly underneath where we are parked. And there we go, look at that. Nice, fresh, disturbed soil. Movement of branches. There you can see it coming back again. There we go. Now compared to the drag mark we saw yesterday, if you look on the right of the screen, you can see those 2 marks there. Those 2 marks there are the tracks of the horn that when we looked at the tracks yesterday crossing just before we found Tingana, those 2 shapes were what stood out for me, which meant it was a male antelope. And definitely, as we see now, it is a young male bushbuck, or it is a bushbuck. It's hard to see the age now because he's just some bits of bone. Dale asks, can you ask that again, please, Nick? Sorry, I got just something about a jaguar. Ian, a good question. How similar are jaguars to leopards in their activities? I have never seen a jaguar, nor studied one in my life, but they come from a very similar background, and I think their behaviors can be quite similar. The lack of competition that jaguars experience in South America means they probably don't hoist their food, they probably don't even need to drag it. Whereas here we've got competition from hyenas and lions, so leopards will hoist their kills most often than not. And if they don't, as what happened with Tingana this morning, he will lose it to something else. Leopards in India, which are also very similarly related, they're just a subspecies of these, do not hoist their kills at all, and they are about the size of lions. So that is very interesting to me. Much bigger animal, filling a different niche. Obviously, tigers are bigger than lions, which means the leopard can be a little bit bigger, but they don't hoist their kills. Big enough to defend them, I suppose. And maybe it's also the fact that they have larger prey items there to feed on. I'm not too sure. But in behavior, in spot pattern, in camouflage, in stalking ability, I think there's a lot that's quite similar in what these animals are able to do. They are meat eaters, and once they eat, the predator's classic flat formation, there's bulging belly and big breathing, trying to digest that, what we would call a Christmas dinner. Probably get about 10 or so kilograms, so about 20 odd pounds in a sitting there, which is a whole lot of meat to have in your belly at one go. Laura Moore has the comment that jaguars interact with water more than leopards. I think that is a definite fact. Well done. Thanks for adding that. Because of their habitat in the Amazon there, they get a lot more inundated, so they would have to. But if you look at lions in the Okavango, there are lions that really, really enjoy the water. If you go to India, the tigers thoroughly enjoy the water. So I think it's something that they get used to. I've seen leopards walking up to dry river beds while they were dry, and then the water starts to cross the road, and I've seen a leopard walk up to that water, just a little stream, and hiss at it. And it was quite funny to see how aggressive the leopard was towards the flowing water. It wasn't exactly what it wanted to dip its toe into. Ralph, you didn't know Indian leopards were as large as they are. A friend of mine is working there and he showed me some photos. I don't know the exact weight, but he says they're as large as lions, and in their weight size, that is huge for a leopard of this size. And he showed me some photos and it's unmistakable, the size difference. Obviously, we'd have to compare them one for one, but just that different niche that they fill there allows them to be a little bit bigger. Once I was down in the garden route and had a leopard and her cub that happened to show itself to me, which I was very fortunate of, and they were along a river, very, very perennial rivers down there, and the cub was jumping from rock to rock. And the Cape leopards are a lot smaller than these. They are the same species, but they're probably half the size. And that's purely because of the prey resource that they have down there. But the leopard cub jumped from rock to rock and then misjudged its leap and landed headlong in the cold river. It was probably one of the funniest things I've seen from a cat as it tried to lurch itself out of the water, trying to grab at the rock and eventually pulling itself out. It almost shrunk in size by about half by the wetness of its fur. And the ears were flat and it was very miserable for a little while after, and Mum barely gave it a glance. So that was quite something. Hukumuri finally has his meal and he is finally relaxing. Raffaele would like to know if leopards sweat after dragging their prey. They don't sweat. There's very few mammals that actually do sweat. We are one of the exceptions. Leopards pant. So that heavy breathing that you're seeing going on there, the heat that it would lose would come from its mouth or its nostrils. So not from any form of sweating. So we were talking about Wildlife Conservation Day, and we went back over to Scott, and Scott added some very, very important elements to what needs to be conserved and focused on, and definitely habitats. We here in the South Africa, in the Sabi Sands and Kruger, are blessed to have these really large ecotourism conservation areas. But what's very important to understand, and what Dr. Ian Player said, is wildlife is not a place, it's a way of life. And if we can understand that and live in harmony with the habitats and with the lifestyles and with the environment, then those animals that are growing and the plants that are surviving will perpetuate for a very long time. But we as humans need to check what we're doing. We need to check our waste. We need to check the pollution. We need to check the devastation we're doing to the planet. We need to conserve the wildlife areas. We need to conserve the habitats. Leopards are very resilient. They will kind of move in and out of anywhere. It's very evident in India. But a lot of the other animals, they really struggle. You lose the habitat, you lose the animals entirely. So very important to put more effort into the conservation of these pristine wilderness areas. And through shows like this, we can raise awareness. Through people coming through and viewing these animals, we can raise awareness. But this needs to be a global thing. What I think a lot of people are unsure of is they think that we all live in a bubble. But what goes on in the Kruger Park is connected to the entire South Africa, connected to the whole of Africa, connected to all the coasts around us, which are then connected to all the other continents. We breathe the same air, and if we are making mistakes in one area, it is going to knock on down, snowball effect further down the way. So we need to start conserving where we live and what we do from a very small scale and think of it as a much bigger scale in the small things that we do. So I hope that is a message to everyone out there to lower the consumerism, to raise the awareness of the wildlife conservation, plants and mammals, and remember, wilderness is a way of life, not just a place. Back over to this beautiful cat. I'm going to probably reposition shortly, see if we can maybe get a little bit closer to him. Project Alpha makes a comment that cats can sweat on their paws. I'm not sure. I have no idea. I mean, we get clammy hands. Do you think maybe cats sweat on their paws because they get nervous? I'm not sure. I don't know. There's probably glands on the feet. they can secrete certain chemicals that other animals, or leopards specifically, can smell, especially when leopards are clawing a tree. But I was unaware that they are able to sweat. It was interesting, though, if that is the case. Well, I think, folks, this might be it for Hukumuri for the day. Don't think he's going to be doing too much, but while we stay with him, maybe reposition for a better view, we're going to go back over to Scott and see what he has for you. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, I'm glad you're safe from Daring Daryl. We've repositioned and Hukumuri moved away just a little bit, but he's on a nice elevated spot. He's been cleaning himself. Always that funny gesture when he licks his shoulder. It always looks so awkward when a leopard does that, but he's grooming, trying to get the smell of the bushbuck off of him. I doubt there was too much blood left on it when he started feeding. But, looking at the state of the carcass that we found just now, it's just some sinew and some bone. But if you listen carefully, we're just going to turn the ambient up a little bit. There's a tree squirrel above Hukumuri that is going absolutely crazy. I don't know if you can hear that, but there's also some there. He spotted Hukumuri when he moved, and there seems to be also a tractor coming along, so I hope that doesn't influence your audio. Hukumuri is interested in the vehicle he doesn't quite know the sound of. He doesn't get followed by tractors, and it's just coming through the drainage lines, so we must apologize for that. The tractor is around doing work. They work on the roads, they drag tires, we keep the roads in good condition. They're also useful for whatever bush work that might be out there. Tractors also something that is very useful in places like the Mara, where all of those who were up there recently, barring myself, tended to get quite stuck. And Hukumuri has lost interest. That is how habituation works, folks. They get used to the sort of sound of a vehicle. Norm, my pleasure. I wanted to come here first thing in the morning. Norm is thanking me for coming back to the Hukumuri sighting. Seb was really keen to see Hukumuri. He told me last night before going to bed, and we made our mission to try to find him this morning. But then, obviously, because Taylor was going into the area to find Tingana, and we had all of the information from all of those viewers from the dam cam, it then so happened that Taylor was in the right position for the Hukumuri male. So Seb was really chomping at the bit this morning to see him. And on our way back, he was like, let's go there. Come on, I deserve to see this beautiful cat. And so do all of you back home. So habituation, folks, you notice he doesn't respond to our Land Rover vehicles, but you saw how he responded to that tractor. It's not something that spent a lot of time with him, so he was looking for a reinforcement. The tractor came, he responded to the noise. If it had come close and caused him any sort of negative response, he would have run away from it, and then he'd learn that he doesn't like that. But ideally, what you do with a vehicle is you will move up towards an animal. You saw how he started reacting. As soon as you see a change in behavior, you switch off, you do absolutely nothing until he relaxes again like he is now. And then if need be, start up the car, wait a little bit, see how he reacts, move a bit close if need be. But obviously that's a process that takes time. Takes time. The squirrel is still shouting at him. Hari, how can a leopard sleep with all those flies? I don't know. It is not a pleasant thing. We've watched Hasana try and catch them repeatedly with his teeth. I'm sure it eventually just gets to a point where you just make do, you make do with what it is. I mean, you've got always quite a feral face because of all the meat that you're on. We actually knew we were close to the carcass by the amount of flies that were landing on our faces. But they just eventually, you tolerate it. I mean, what can you do if you can't do anything? They do snap at them. I've seen Hasana do a lot of the snapping at the flies. Dogs I used to have back home would snap at flies, but it doesn't really alleviate the annoyance that they have. So in Buddhist principles, if you just accept what is for what it is, it diminishes. If you feed fire to it, it gets worse and worse. For example, if you have an itch on your foot, if you scratch it, the itch will appear somewhere else. And then you scratch that, it will appear in another place. But if you ignore the initial itch, the itching disappears altogether. So it's quite a nice Buddhist philosophy. Oh, we've got a white-throated robin chat that's just joining us here. I wonder if he's going to move into visual. Don't know if you can get him, Seb. He's just here in the bushes on the left. Just up a bit. Oh, he just came down. He flew down into the front of us. Oh, pity. I haven't seen one of those in ages. White-throated robin chat. I'll get a picture for you. Maybe I can actually call him, because they're quite responsive to calls. While we're looking at the spots of hukumuri there, nice to see a new bird for me in Djuma. White-throated robin chat. Let me just find him. I'm going to play his call. The robins are quite territorial and they do like to come out and explore. So I'll keep my... There's his call. He's just flown across the front of us there. Hopefully he'll show himself a little bit more obviously. And hopefully Seb can get him on camera. So he responded to the call, but he's just darted into this very thick bush on the left of us here. Oh, you can hear the greater honeyguide in the background. Greater honeyguide has that victor sound. It's a territorial call. I don't know if you picked it up on the audio there. Okay, well, I'm going to stay here with Hukumuri until the end of the show, I'm sure, and maybe try to get a couple more birds to come out and say hi. And while we do so, we're going to go back over to Taylor, who's having a nice elephant morning. He's moved right up to the road, so we weren't getting a very good visual of him there. So I know we've only got a very small amount of time left, but we're just going to pop out here onto the road, and then we're going to get the credits rolling with this beautiful male leopard. Just hold on with us. I think we are nearly there. We're probably about 30 seconds from getting him. He is posing very nicely for us over here. And let's see. We did manage to get that robin chat again, but... oh, my word. There he is. He has crossed the road, regardless of our efforts. Regardless of our efforts, he is down here. The tractor came past again. I don't think he enjoyed that. He is disappearing into the very thick bush on our left. There he goes, into the thickets. Oh. So, folks, it's very hard to say exactly where he's going or how we're going to see him again. He's just going underneath the dead branch over there. Just